Today, we're going to talk about the introduction to and background information of the novel Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. The genre of the novel is postmodern, like dystopian genre. It's considered a dystopia, which means it's the opposite of paradise. The qualities of a dystopia are that it's the opposite of perfection, and it's a sort of warning against what could happen if we continued in this trends that we currently have in our society. So the definition of a dystopia is an imaginary place where people lead dehumanized and often fearful lives. Dehumanized means it's the qualities of what's actually like human and creates our experiences is removed. Postmodernism means that it's a genre of literature that emerged as sort of a reaction to or as societal sort of commentary on what is bad sort of in our society. And it is like ironic, which is the opposite of what you would think it means. And it shows just like the absurdity of our society or different social constructs that we have. So dystopia is, like I said, the opposite of perfect, and it's very exaggerated. It's often like just these horrors are taking place or things that we would never accept in our society. Also, postmodern is skeptical and ironic, and it shows like that what is happening in our world is like incorrect. And so this often serves as like a warning or as a prediction of what our society is headed towards. So, to demonstrate this sort of dystopian nature, here's a quote from the text, Brave New World. They'll grow up with what the psychologists used to call an instinctive hatred of books and flowers, reflexes unalterably conditioned. They'll be safe from books and botany all their lives. And so this is like a commentary on how like the future of our society is moving away from things that are beautiful and towards things that are like not good for your soul, I guess. So we are going to talk about features of the text, moving away from the genre, information about Aldous Huxley, and different like characters and settings and things like that. So Aldous Huxley was an intellectual from parents who were well educated, had traumatic experiences, and so this often fuels like a writer who is a skeptic or who is writing social commentary. And this piece that he wrote, Brave New World, why we're reading it is it's one of the most canonical pieces of postmodern fiction and in this genre. And so that's kind of where we're ending our study of British literature. He was influenced by these people at the time: Virginia Woolf, T.S. Eliot, Lawrence. He was living in France when he wrote this, and this was his passion, like understanding our world and the consequences of our technological advancements. So we're going to look at our historical context and the features of the text here. So here's an introduction of the text. So it is a seemingly perfect, like I said, a dystopian sort of society. There's no sickness in this society. There's no sadness. There's no death. Or sorrow in death. There's no sadness in death. There's just happiness, very shallow happiness with no sort of meaning to it. Or any sort of depth in relationship or significance in their lives. The citizens worship Ford as sort of a similar figure in Brave New World. Ford is the creator of the assembly line, and so he is sort of their image that they worship for that reason. So if you're trying to picture like what a utopian would look like, this is like one person's depiction of that. So now, instead of having like a family dynamic, because there are no relationships anymore in this Brave New World, people are created in test tubes. Instead of being born, there are no families, there is no children, there's no sort of relationships or involvement in any prolonged way at all. The embryos are created to have a certain intelligence, to have a certain sort of like personality traits based on how they're created in their test tubes. And then when they're fully developed as babies, they're conditioned. The definition of conditioned is like sort of training a baby to feel a certain way, want certain things, and have certain desires. So instead of being raised with like traditional values in a family unit, these little babies are created to have certain intelligences and then conditioned or trained to want certain things so that they can fulfill certain social classes. And society can be filled out with lower level to higher level thinkers and job like requirements. So little tiny test tube. These are how babies are created now. Sex is merely just for pleasure. There is no sex for having babies. If you had an actual baby, it would just be like horrific to this society. Just absolutely like disgusting. So the main character of Brave New World is Bernard. He is an outcast in the utopian society. Lenina is just a really flat character, a representation of the shallowness of this new society and this lack of depth of their characters. And then John the Savage was raised on the reservation as an outcast in both the Brave New World and the traditional society. So Bernard is an alpha. Like I said, they're different classes of people decided by how they're created in their test tubes. And he's just this outcast because he doesn't think similarly to any other person, or not to any other person, but to many people. He doesn't fit in. He doesn't want to take their drug that causes just extreme happiness. He wants to feel the depth of emotions, and he's just very much in turmoil of not fitting in. He has a friend named Helmholtz who's also an outcast, but for different reasons. It's not really his personality, it's more of his intellect that makes him different from everyone else. Lenina is an alpha also, so the top class. So there's different social classes of people. And so the alpha, think A at the top of the alphabet is alpha. And so Lenina is at the top. She's just completely brainwashed. She doesn't want any relationships. She takes the happiness drug called Soma just all the time to feel nothing but happiness. She buys into all of the societal norms of not wanting relationship, not wanting anything negative in her life. She's super just shallow, unaware, and will never change. She's a flat character. She represents just basically everything that's wrong with this new utopian or dystopian society. John the Savage then is sort of the foil or the opposite or the counterpart to Lenina. He is from a savage reservation. So there's kind of two settings. There's this dystopian country, and that's like the new world state. And then there is in the United States, in an area in New Mexico, sort of a reservation where traditional values of family and religion and culture are sort of maintained as almost like an experiment. It's not for I don't know, it's not for any like social integration. People don't choose to live there. It's set apart. And you can go there and sort of see them as a vacation, which Lenina and Bernard do. And so a man named John lives there. He's from the utopian society, accidentally born on this reservation land, and then is just sort of traumatized throughout the whole novel of not being accepted into the past and what was cultural tradition, or the new world society. And it just traumatizes him and changes him mentally. So one of the hugest issues that's brought up in this piece of social commentary is just mindless consumerism. Consumerism is buying things that you don't maybe necessarily need, but we're told in our society that we do to have happiness. This is because the text is written during the Great Depression, and during the time Ford created the assembly line, and this caused like this mass production of things that needed to be sold. So this text serves as a warning against like mass consumerism, a problem that arose during this time in the 20s, when debt and overspending created an economic depression. So I hope you're familiar with the depression of the 1930s that was created after the boom of consumerism, or mindless buying and accruing credit that people could not actually afford. And so this is sort of the context this text was written. So accruing of debt during this time. So this is the commentary on this. So what comes out of sort of consumerism in this new society are these sayings or these quotes, and they're these slogans. And so the slogans are said instead of like actual thinking. And so one slogan that is propagated by the government is ending is better than mending. So buying more things is better than like valuing what you do have. So this is a quote by Linda, who is one of the Brave New World Society members. And this is like her representation of, why would I value something that I have if I could buy something new? That's my place in this world for mass consumerism. This beastly wool isn't like acetate. It lasts and lasts, and you're supposed to mend it if it gets torn. Besides, it never used to be right to mend clothes. Throw them away if they've got holes in them and buy new. And so there's no value in what you own in this society. Wool is less than acetate. So also, this is just a continuance of the idea of consumerism and like just getting things to cause happiness instead of actually finding happiness. So Huxley also uses this text to comment on the loss of morality and the emotional danger of open sexuality. So open sexuality, loose morals goes along with mass consumerism. During the Roaring Twenties, there were new characters that sort of came up who were very loose in their morals than previous times, and who sort of represented a huge shift in what would happen sexually in society. And so there was a lot of alcohol in the 1920s when this text was written, and which is a social commentary, and there was loose morals based on this alcohol. And so this text is like warning against that sort of thing. Sex became cheap in this time, and in this novel, sex is basically meaningless other than pleasure seeking. There's like they seek pleasure from sex more than almost anything else, and they use a drug called soma to increase the pleasure of sex, but there's absolutely no emotional connection. They're encouraged to have many partners, and the partners shouldn't last for a long time, and so sex is just used for pleasure only. It's like a mindlessness. And so this is from the text also, this quote: "You have sex with any partner you want, who wants you, and sooner or later every partner will want you. And your popularity in this society depends on how much sex you have, basically, with more partners, as many partners as possible." And so we're going to look at this piece of text also. Lenina, in response to John the Savage's actual love and desire for marriage and a deep relationship, just offers him sex. She has nothing else. She has no depth of character or emotion to offer him, because these people in the society are so controlled by just mindlessness that they can't interact with each other in any sort of meaningful way. Sex is seen as routine, expected, and emotionless in this utopian society. So this is another slogan. Again, the slogans are a way to communicate instead of authentic communication. So this is a slogan. We had one about mindless consumerism. Here's a slogan, or like a saying that the government gave you about drugs and the relationship with sex. So, hug me till you drug me, honey. Kiss me till I'm in a coma. Hug me, honey, snuggly bunny. Life's as good as soma. So there's no real thoughts. When they come into any sort of conflict, they have these pre-programmed thoughts that come through their conditioning as babies to say instead of thinking the slogans. All right. So we're going to keep going. Every person in the society takes the drug soma. It is fictional. So let's get that in our brains. It's a fictional drug because it's both a stimulant and a depressant. It just puts you in this void mindlessness where you can't interact in any sort of meaningful way. It just sort of takes out all of the variables of what you would feel if you had emotions. And so because of this drug, there's no sort of sadness or frustration or anger. If they start to feel those, they're conditioned to just take this drug and block that out and sort of go on a holiday from reality, is what they call it. This is how the character Linda dies, because she just blocks out and goes into this soma holiday, this void of her mind, until she eventually dies. So this is a quote of Linda as she died, overdosing on this fictional drug. She remained in her little room on the 37th floor of Bernard's apartment house, and the soma tablets within reach of her hand. These prescription drugs were given by the government. It wasn't like an illegal thing. They were rationed, so people would take them all the time. And different social classes had different amounts of the drug given to them to sort of deal with the hardships that they have to undergo, or whatever emotions they might come into interaction with. So another sort of topic that we're studying is science as a way to control people and governments and systems. So in this utopian society, which is ironic because it's actually a dystopian, which is the opposite of perfect. Science is used to control people. There's no longer community, identity, individuality. Instead, there's stability in their society because of scientific control. Mostly this is done through conditioning. And so The social classes are created in the hatcheries, which is the opening scene of the book. Conditioning is a process we talked about a little bit earlier, but here it is again. Children are set to go through experiences to make them like want certain things, be certain people, have really particular thoughts to put them into a very clear social class. There are lower classes. Hold on. So we went through that quote already, actually. So there are lower classes, which are gammas, deltas, epsilons. We talked about earlier how there's alphas. And so A and B, alphas and betas, they're the like kind of upper class. And then gammas, deltas, epsilons are the lower classes. And they're treated with conditioning. And this shows like how science is used to control their society. And so the deltas go through a process of conditioning so that they'll want to do lower class work and never complain about it and never want to move up. The lower classes are treated with alcohol in their little test tubes when they're created so that they're mentally not as capable, and they're conditioned to not want things that are intellectual or beautiful. And so they're just happy like living a very simple life in like a city with bad conditions and not a lot of resources, because like that's all they want. They don't want anything else. And that like these deltas, gammas, epsilons, they need to serve in this perfect quote unquote world place of like being lower class, because someone's got to do that labor work, right? Someone's got to do the labor. Not everyone can be like upper class workers. Some people have to do the hard work, and so they create these people to fill that place in the society, and they're like puppets on strings, all of these people. And so this is also a commentary at the time about how in the 1920s kind of area of history, there were totalitarian leaders who were rising up and controlling their people with slogans and with sort of mindlessness that is represented in Brave New World. And there's Hitler as in like representation, and Mussolini or whatever, Stalin. Okay, so I talked about that. And so like the dictators in the society that is the context of Huxley writing Brave New World. These dictators in real life were actually also using censorship, which is a huge piece of control in the world state of the Brave New World Society. There are controllers like these dictators in Brave New World. One of them that we're going to interact with is Mustafa Mond, and he basically gets to make the deep thinking, questioning society values like decisions for the whole world state and how they think. So no one gets to think independently of sort of how these dictators or these world controllers in Brave New World think. All right. So one of the ways that the little babies are conditioned instead of raised in families is hypnopaedia, which is giving them sort of those slogans in their sleep. So their subconscious thinking, or the thinking that happens without them even realizing it, is these slogans and the propaganda that comes from the government and the controllers of the world state. There's absolutely no like mental or physical freedom in this world state, but ironically, there is intense pleasure and happiness that is in essence meaningless. All right, hypnopaedia, teaching people while they sleep. This is a quote that shows us about hypnopaedia being used as conditioning on the children. Till at last the child's mind is these suggestions. That's all their mind is. And the sum of the suggestions is the child's mind, and not the child's mind only, the adult's mind too, all his life long. The mind that judges and desires and decides made up of these suggestions, but these suggestions are our suggestions from the state. So the only thing that creates people's thinking in this time is what the government controls it to be. So this work is a satire, which is almost like, not like comedy, but it's an exaggeration of what is happening in society to show it, sort of shed light on the problems that it has. This book serves as a warning of like the future of our society. He could have had sort of a motivation for writing is that he can shed light on what the problems are and what the future might become. What will happen if we seek pleasure through consumerism, through open sexuality and use of substances, and also allowing government to control our minds. And so those are sort of the motivations to offer like what will happen in our future. And so like one of the highlights of this is that as the efficiency of the society was like increased, the connection between people was decreased. So one of the motivations is using literature and language to investigate truths lying beneath human corruption. So using our words and our language to understand like really the deep-seated problems of our society. So again, I already did this, but as the like efficiency of the world state, technology and our government and what we have increases, the connection between people and our belief systems and our personal identities are sort of destroyed. So as we generate that perfection, we lose culture, preference, our own personal thought, belief in goodness of people generally. And this is highlighted through the reservation that John the Savage was born into. And it's sort of a commentary on, in this New World society, there are no bad things. There's no hunger, there's no homelessness, there's no disease. And so it's kind of conflicting. Wouldn't we want these things if we were to have a perfect utopian society? But what is the cost of us getting this perfection, losing our individuality and our choice? So here's a video that I'm also going to link to I'm going to link this video to your assignment as well. And so you have the slides and you can come back to this and sort of watch this video independently of sort of an image of what a Brave New World society would look like if we were living in a perfect world. So the last thing we're going to look at here before you do a response is the themes and the topics that we're going to study, and that will become the central piece of our assessment at the end of reading this text. So a theme is a complete sentence that is like your own opinion based on a prolonged study of a topic. So a theme is like a full sentence that is your explained out opinion based on what you have learned by reading a text and analyzing it thoroughly. A topic or a trope, either one, you can decide between those, is sort of just like a phrase or a set of words that helps you direct your study to develop a theme. So here are the themes and topics that we're going to be studying: social and economic divide between people who have things and people who do not have things, and why that societal class system is created, or maybe in the society necessitated. Satiating, which means just like pleasing the people, and just like keeping them from questioning anything. So like kind of putting like this void in their minds using mindless advertising, and in this case, slogans from the government, sexual pleasure, mindless entertainment that comes in sort of sexual entertainment in Brave New World, and also just like use of drugs and substances to like just control people. The loss of personal identity and individuality, because stability comes with everyone being happy, right? And no pain. Like I said, prescription drugs used to just cure all problems instead of actually understanding experience and human individuality and identity. Technology as what will perpetuate society moving forward, and the fact that sex and intimacy and relationships, so not just sex, but also those relationships, are now used instead of like meaning in life, just for pleasure seeking. So this piece is sort of a canonical piece of what is represented as like postmodern literature, and so that's why we're reading it. And so there's that. So one of the essential questions we'll look at is, what is the future of society? And so you're going to do a response on your guided notes as a follow-up to these notes, and then we'll continue on learning about the background information so that we're prepared to read Brave New World. Thanks.